All right, welcome everybody to another video oral history from the Clark County Historical Association. My name is Nathan Stalvey, the director of the Clark County Historical Association, and this series of videos focuses on businesses in Clark County and a little bit about their history, the people who work there, and how they're handling the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm joined today by the good folks of Locke Store, and if you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Juliet Mackay Smith, proprietor, former proprietor. Well, more about that.
Okay.
For the last 18 years.
I'm Ruth Emma.
And I'm Max Emma.
Nice. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for taking the time out to talk a little bit about Locke Store. And first, I wanted to ask you. So, Locke Store has a lot of people don't realize, but Locke Store has been around not quite as long as the mill, but almost. The Locke Store has been around since the early 19th century, and it's been there ever since. What can you tell me about just some brief history of Locke Store?
Well, the store itself was built in 1836 by a guy named James Clark, who also built the Clark House, which you know well, I'm sure, is just a couple of buildings away from the mill, just across the street diagonally from the store. And took possession of both of those buildings in 1842. And there's been an unbroken succession of storekeeping there ever since. And I'm only the seventh proprietor. But the building that we're sitting in is older than that. It dates to 1804 and is currently called the Buttery. It is fully operational now as an adjunct to Locke Store, and a small bistro restaurant space that we just opened up last year. But my father was really instrumental in saving this building. It was in extreme disrepair. And about 15 years ago, shortly after we took over the property, we started renovating it. And it's been about 4 or 5 different iterations of renovation since then. And it's finally preserved and really just a gem. So it was built as the original storehouse for the mill across the way, which is behind you.
Yes.
Which that mill, I believe, was built in 1892 or a little bit before that.
The mill was built in 1782 to 1785.
I mean, 1782. Okay, yeah. So anyway, this store was built to provide a storehouse for the provisions for the people that were running the mill and the slaves 24/7 during that time, as well as for the grains that they were milling before they were sent out overseas, even some of them shipped out. There was a distillery as well in the parking lot, as I think you probably know, of the mill. And so they stored the kegs of liquor that they made over there before they shipped them out in the basement here. And part of how my father determined that this was the original storehouse is that there are bars on the windows downstairs that are made to keep people out instead of to keep people in.
Wow.
So those kegs of liquor, which were referred to as butts, were stored in the basement. And so that's the Buttery. It's not dairy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What a lot of people don't realize is that it makes total sense for that to be like a storage area for the Burwell-Morgan Mill, because what people don't realize is if you look at the image of the Burwell-Morgan Mill behind me, that entire upper level, that where with the wood siding and everything, and the roof, all that was added in after the Civil War. So when the Buttery was built, you're looking at just the main floor and the basement of the mill. So all that grain had to be stored somewhere. They were also producing grain 1,000 times more than what we produce now. So it had to go somewhere before it was shipped over. So that is really interesting. And you can even see some of the architecture of the Buttery right there behind you, and just how anybody who hasn't been into the Buttery has to check it out. It's beautiful inside, absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So what was Locke Store like? When people go to Locke Store now, they can get a lot of food from local farms. They can get craft beer, they can get wine. There's a wide variety, but it wasn't always like that. What was it like, earlier in the 20th century, for example?
Well, as I said, the succession of shopkeepers included my predecessors, which were Phil and Oppie Cunningham. And they started working there as teenagers in 1944. And then they took it over as owners in 56. But they had told me some stories that are really quite incredible, the things that went on in Locke Store, including someone slightly inebriated riding in the front door on their horse at one point. So it was a rowdy center of town. There was a lot going on in Millwood back in the early part of the 1900s. But one thing that I thought was really fun and kind of relates to what's going on now in terms of how we've had to pivot during this COVID deal, which we'll talk more about, to this curbside pickup, is that apparently on Saturdays, and this was in the 40s and on into the 50s, on Saturdays, the farmers would all come through, leave their grocery lists at the store for Phil and Oppie to fill, and go to Berryville to the movies. And then they would come back with, expectation their order was filled, but moreover, to party. And he said it would turn into, a big old whiskey and moonshine fest.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So they had a good time. And there was actually just a special note, because for people that come to the store now, the facade looks original. And it is in some ways, but it actually suffered a fire in 1935. And there was a second story on the building at that time. Also stories in and around lots of gambling and things going on in that second story. But it was a break-in, someone coming in to steal the safe, which they did, and the safe was never recovered. But they burned the building. So they quickly rebuilt. So the facade is more to that era of 1935 or so.
It's funny. So when you think of, I think when a lot of people think of Millwood now, it's a quiet, quaint little community and pretty peaceful and restful. But if they go back to the 30s, 20s, totally different story. Sounds like totally different story. Horses riding into the store, whiskey and moonshine. My goodness, that sounds like a fun time. So
I like to get rowdy here too a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I can imagine so. So nowadays, it's one of the things that has affected everybody in Clark County has been the COVID-19 pandemic. Everybody's had to get creative. Everybody's had to kind of change their ways of how to do business. What are some of the things that you guys had to do? How did you address the COVID-19 changes, and how has it affected you guys?
So here's a good opportunity for me to note that I have recently sold the store to Max and Ruth, and I'm going to be working alongside Brian and Shauna Volmerick, who've been in here with me for about a year and a half. But these guys are both former employees of Locke Store. So probably a good opportunity to just talk about how they came to the table, and then how we're all in the mix now in this really extreme.
Actually, a good question. So Max and Ruth, you guys, when did the two of you come in to take over Locke Store? Was it right before the pandemic broke out? During?
Just like 3 weeks ago.
Just about a month ago.
Oh wow. Okay.
Full swing.
But Max and Ruth both were in here with me prior.
Okay. So what was the interest in, well, first of all, how long were the two of you working at Locke Store prior? And second question is, what were some of the interest in coming back and becoming the new proprietors?
So I worked there for about 5 years, and I was the general manager helping Juliet to run the store. And I always wanted to buy Locke Store, and so that's what brought me back this time. And then Max.
I was here just over a year. That was 3 or 4 years ago. And likewise, my dream was to buy the store and finally give Juliet the retirement that she deserves. And as life had it, Ruth and I took a break and ended up finally in a strange time in the world, we're able to make this all work. And it's been really it's different. It's a very different model right now. But when I called Juliet, it was during the pandemic. We had kept in touch over the years, but I didn't know what I would be coming into, what we would be coming into. And her first response was, "Oh, we are slammed. We're so busy." And I hung up the phone after that conversation, and I thought, that makes sense, because of the way that the community has always loved this store and has taken care of this store, the way that Juliet has set this store up and the staff has set this store up over the years. It's amazing. It's really special.
Yeah,
Nice.
it more or less has a life of its own.
Yeah.
It wants to be a store.
Yes, yes, it does. It does. It really does. It's and you know, the Clark County Historical Association, we love working with you guys all the time. We have big events and we have our art show, which unfortunately we had to cancel this spring. But yeah, we love coming over to you guys for wine, to purchase wine, and certainly to get some expertise on which wine would be the best to serve our guests. So you came in the middle of the pandemic, and what were some of the changes that you had to make to fit this current reality with something that really hasn't been seen in over 100 years?
Yeah. So we, as Max referenced, the model was sort of set up to serve the community, as a lot of our colleagues really in the hospitality industry have been struggling because they didn't have a takeout model already. But our store basically has been developed on that model. So it wasn't that it was easy for us, but we already had those wheels in motion to be able to provide the types of things that we could pivot to a curbside pickup. We tried to have people coming in the store. I think you actually came in with a group during that first week when we tried to manage some people coming into the store, and it was just too chaotic. So we said we're going to move to curbside and have control over our staff, which it's a pretty big staff. You know, we have about 20 people, some of them part-time, but it's a lot of staff. And so the exposure level was just too risky. So we went to the curbside model, and the inside of the store over the next 2 weeks became a full-on sort of warehouse grocery model so that our packers could pack all of the boxes after we got all of them, you know, all the orders online, sometimes on the phone, but it's a whole different way of organizing the way people are shopping. We're basically personal shopping for people. So that was very challenging. And the store now, as these guys came in and they knew it from before and they hadn't seen it since all this went down. And I said, it's still great. It's still really doing its thing. It's wonderful, but it's kind of in its pajamas and it needs a haircut.
As we all are at this point, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many Zoom meetings I've had, work Zoom meetings I've had, where I've certainly been in my pajama bottoms. At least, you know, I'd wear a nice professional shirt, but, you know, slippers and pajama bottoms almost all the time. So,
Anyway, so that's the state it's in inside right now, but
right.
you know, we'll be able to spruce it up and get it back. These guys will. That's what I'm training myself to say, you instead of we.
So staying along the lines with COVID-19, the governor has issued like phased openings, and where today, actually June 5th, is the first day of the phase 2 of the reopening. And that means that certain establishments can have people inside, but only at limited capacity. What does phase 2 look like for you guys?
I'm going to let you guys talk about this, because we've been having, and I will just say, in terms of my relationship right now with the store, just staying on for a little while in transition, mentoring a little bit, answering questions, and also working with the wine department still, and the kitchen to some degree with the recipes, because we're hopeful to put a cookbook together.
Ooh, very nice. Very nice.
But anyway, that said, it's been very challenging, needless to say, to figure out what to do to safeguard our staff, to do what the community is hoping and expecting, and at the same time balancing up, you know, the safety of all of our customers as well. So these guys have been in a lot of meetings and trying to figure out how to work with all the reopening. So
thank you. And it's interesting that the phases that Virginia is considering, while we would love to consider them as they are, and we would love for them to work for the model, the way that the curbside orders are working, and we've talked to a lot of the customers and have said, if we were open tomorrow, would you come in, or would you prefer to have curbside still an option? And the majority of the customers here specifically have said, we really would prefer that you carry on with curbside, because we feel safe knowing that the store is closed and that exposure is limited. So our plans currently are to keep the business as curbside only for the next couple of weeks, and then consider reopening as long as the numbers continue to decline. Not only in Clark County, but in the surrounding areas. You can't just look at Clark County, because our customers come even from DC and Arlington.
Right. I was going to say over the mountain, where some of the harder hit areas. Yeah.
So, and to add to that, we do have a buttery and we have the patio outside. So there are plans that will be coming out in the next 7 days, maybe even less, which we will announce on our newsletter and post on the website, that will open that portion of it up. We feel safe that at a limited capacity, that with a limited capacity, we can go to reservation only for a while, and make sure that everybody is kept at a safe distance, and they can enjoy the good food and wine and cocktails. It's been an interesting transition. There's been a lot to consider. Like Juliet said, there's a large staff here, and taking everybody's well-being into consideration.
Mm. Did you guys have to go through the payroll protection program stuff? Did you guys have to apply for that? Yeah, so many small businesses did. Yeah, as did we.
I have an excellent lender who came to me actually and said, you must do this, and here's what you need to do, and you need to do it fast.
Right. Yeah, that money ran out very fast. Yes. Yeah. So that was same with us. We had somebody who came to us and said, yeah, you can't wait on this. If you're going to do it, you got to do it now. Yeah. So talking about the outdoor seating, you had said earlier that the model for so long of Locke Store had been basically people coming in, getting stuff and taking with them. But not long ago, you added some seating to the back. You added restrooms. You expanded into the buttery. So tell me a little bit about how that model has, what that shift in focus has been like with more outdoor seating.
It was sort of like starting a new business, actually, last year. And I finished all of the renovation concomitant with, rolling out that new program. But it has been, really a long desired model that finally came to fruition, and that my father would really, really love to see happening. He wanted to see this as a functional space and something where people were getting together and enjoying one another's company and the history and the food. So we were really happy to be able to pull all that together last year. But we no longer can do it the same way.
Right. Yeah. Now that you spent all that time and money, now that we're.
Well, it was, we were getting rolling with it, but I feel confident with these guys and the team that they have, that they're gonna be able to get rolling again here pretty quickly.
Well, on a little personal note, I will say that one of my first dates with my current girlfriend, we've been dating about a year now, was to the opening out there of the buttery and the back space, and so I remember that very well. It was nice, and then it rained, and we all went to the buttery afterwards. So.
Yeah. No, that was a really fun evening. These guys don't know this. It was just inviting the community to come, and we had a party.
Yeah, so, it was really nice. Yeah, and so it rained. People didn't care. Everybody still had a great time. So what about the future of Locke Store? What kind of ideas do you have? I know it's really hard to even think about the future during the COVID-19 pandemic, but what are some of your ideas for short-term and long-term for Locke Store?
Sure. So I think short-term, our goal is to keep it as is and talk with the staff and the community and friends and family and Juliet a lot about what she thinks will work and what they think will work, and changes that everybody has wished to see here over the years. Something like the patio and the buttery, it was a necessary evolution. It just takes time to get to that point. And then long term, Juliet mentioned the cookbook that we want to work on together. We want to expand on the wine department and work on our recipes and incorporate new and exciting events into the buttery and into the wine club, the courting club. There's a lot to be worked out and figured out. We're not sure of all the next steps yet, but we're excited to find out what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I imagine as fairly new proprietors, there's still a lot going on in your head right now as far as like, wow, there's a lot to consider, but maybe we should just try to figure out the pandemic first, how to get through that first. Yeah, yeah. So do you guys have any other stories you'd like to share about Locke Store, about your personal experiences? What are some of the things that you personally like about Locke Store?
I like being able to come into the store and have the community coming in and connecting with people and people from all over our backgrounds. And it's just, to me, it's a way to really get tapped into people, which I like.
I'm just excited to have a little time to myself, to be honest. It's been a labor of love, no doubt. And the store, as I referenced earlier, and I could get emotional talking about the store, it's a really special place, no question. And it's got its own energy and its own juju. And it is definitely going to thrive with these guys and on into the future. It's a thing.
Well, Juliet has built it to be what it is today, and we are honored and thrilled to be able to step into part of her shoes, hopefully, and continue it.
It's certainly not a place you can really compare to anything else. It really has its own identity, and I think that's speaks volumes.
In my tenure there, I would say, I feel like I sort of raised it up from where Phil and Oppie had it. It was a different kind of a store, and I put the kitchen in and had a background in catering and brought all the food, you know, to the fore and the deli and all that, and then the wine program. But it's definitely been the contributions of so many people during my time there, and that's what will be reflected in the cookbook, which is really the coolest thing. So many different people that have come in and worked with me and left their mark and their signature on what is still going on in there today. So
Definitely.
Excellent. And Max, what about you? What's something about Locke Store that you just really love?
My favorite time in Locke Store, I'm usually an early riser, and many times I'm the first person to get here. It's before the store opens. It's very calm and it's quiet, and as you turn the lights on, it just comes to life. And like Juliet said earlier in this conversation, it really wants to be a store, and it welcomes you in the morning. It's a brilliant feeling. It's ready. Yeah. It's ready. All the equipment is ready. It's always on time. Food, the oven kicks right on. It smells good. It's special. It's really special. And then of course, opening the door and the customers show up and the coffee's brewing, and it just watching the whole thing come to life and then go to bed every day. It's really unique.
Yeah, well said.
Nice. That's very nice. Well, thank you guys for doing this, and really appreciate the time to tell everybody. And again, people are going to be looking at this hopefully 100 years from now to say, wow, this crazy pandemic, how did people in Clark County deal with it? And I think what better place than Locke Store and the Buttery, some of the most iconic buildings in Clark County. So really thank you all for taking the time out. And for those of you who are watching, yes.
Sorry to interrupt your
yes.
closure. Did not specifically mention, and in this pandemic, it's become more of something at the forefront of what the store has been working with. And when Brian and Shauna came on with me, they started a community board, and it's a pay it forward. Some customers want to put on the board a value chit, so to speak, and then another customer can take advantage of that if they don't have the money or they want to, get their lunch or whatever. So it's really been a remarkable thing. And during this pandemic, very successful in terms of the community coming together, supporting that pay it forward system, and a lot of our neighbors taking not advantage, but partaking in that process. So just wanted to get that in there.
Oh yes, definitely. And anything else you guys want to put out there?
If anybody wants to get more information on our plans for opening or events that might be coming up, you can go to our website, lockstore.com. We also have Instagram and Facebook under Locke Store, and you can sign up to be on our newsletter, which comes out once a week, or give the store a call.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. It's been a wonderful interview, and you can't really think about community in Clark County without thinking about Locke Store. And really, again, thank you guys for doing this. And
Thank you.
Thank
yeah,
you.
and for those of you who are watching this video, please be sure to click subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch a lot of history videos, interviews with businesses around the county, tours to Cold War bunkers and Carter Hall, lots of behind the scenes tours to check out. So be sure to check that out, and we add new content all the time. Thank you again, Ruth and Emma and Juliet. We really appreciate it, and we will hopefully get some more people out in the Locke Store soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nathan.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.